Welcome back to GoPowerCat.com's PowerChat with Joe Hall. We're sponsored by Blue Mark Energy. Well, we covered a lot of ground in part one, so let's get to part two of the PowerChat with Joe Hall. Now we continue our Power Chat with Joe Hall, who now works for K-State. We talked a lot about the Joe Hall that got by. And let's advance now to you're out of the league. You got to face life without football. You set up shop in Arizona, correct? And you start working with youth, probably more from a sports standpoint. But it doesn't take you long to realize you need to work with these kids on more than just sports.
Yeah.
So you developed a program called Change Your Aim, and I'm intrigued by it. Run through in your mind at that time what Change Your Aim was.
Okay. Well, prior to actually the Change Your Aim program, I was doing the speed and agility, sports related movement stuff with a lot of the young kids in the area. Arizona being a place where a lot of former athletes in general of all sports come and set up shop after their careers or even in the off seasons. It was a big boom of trainers and things of that nature. So everybody that had any knowledge of anything was trying to get into some type of personal training. When I started with the kids, I realized really quickly that a lot of these kids had ability. A lot of these kids were talented. And there was a reason why such a widespread number of talented kids that just don't get to where they wanted to get, or where they wanted to go, or where they planned on going. And then I just subconsciously started thinking about these things and how could you ensure or heighten the opportunities or increase the opportunities of these kids having greater chances of being successful, especially in the sport. The Change Your Aim program came about. I didn't have a degree at the time.
Right.
I didn't have my undergrad. One of my good friends was actually from my neighborhood is Gene Boyd, and he's at Arizona State University. He's an associate athletic director, I believe, there. And he had been in Arizona State for years, went to he's an alum. And we had done a lot of conversations about what I wanted to do long term and how he could incorporate what I wanted to do at the university. And and I think the idea was that I had a degree. So we went through, I met all of these wonderful people at Arizona State down in Tempe, and we get to the final stretch, and what are we going to do here? Are you wanting to do an internship? Are you willing to do man, I just want to get in, just show me how to get here. So what did you get your degree in, was the question. And I was like, well, I didn't get a degree, but I majored in sociology. And he's like, well, you didn't graduate? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, we can't even go any further. How can we speak education and speak future planning without you having those things? And it was and he's 10 or so years older than me, was kind of a big brother all through my life. And it got to a point where it was like big brother was telling me that I needed to go handle those things. I think the realization that for the things that I wanted to accomplish, for the things that I wanted to do with my life, it was ultimately going to come back to the thing that I stayed away from, which was the education part of it. not necessarily from a learning perspective, but actually sitting in the classroom and doing tests and things like that. And I just couldn't imagine with the things that I had done in my life personally that I would want to ever go back that route. But it was a necessity. So it came down to, I left that meeting and went right home and told my wife that I wanted to enroll in classes. I knew we had the Second Wind program at Kansas State. So that was the easiest way of me, Phil Hughes was still here at the time, I believe. And I contacted everybody that I needed to. They pointed me in the right directions. And it just started with me getting in the class and actually doing everything online and feeling like I could do this. I could really do this. And because I didn't have all of these other things going on, because I had cleared some mental space in terms of my own mental health, it just didn't seem as hard as it once did. It just, the classes actually aligned a lot better when you're not failing classes and not, withdrawing from classes and not taking classes to replace other classes. Things just kind of lined up so much easier and so much more simple.
You got out of your own way.
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly what it was. It was once all of those outside influences, internal influences cleared, then it was just a matter of, you're a smart guy, you can handle the work, let's just get it done. You have passion, you have dreams, let's go towards them. And it wasn't, well, they don't want to give you the ball, they don't want this, they don't want, mom wants this. It wasn't all of those things. It was just the difference of transitioning from, a boy that can't handle, all of these things to a man that is managing them a little bit better. So
having a wife kind of changes that too.
It does. It does. She is definitely the voice of reason a lot of times. So if not all the time.
I'm not sure where she's from, but I mean, you come back to Kansas. Mm-hmm. How many kids did you have at the time when you relocated?
We relocated. We were, I believe, 2 children.
2 children.
I believe.
You worked your way up to 4. We'll get to that.
Yes. 3 children.
3 children. Okay. You get your degree. Mm-hmm. Boom. That's done. You go to Mid-America Nazarene. Mm-hmm. I'm going to coach. But something more happened at Mid-America Nazarene. You didn't just coach. You fell in love with academics, didn't you?
I did. I had Jonathan Quinn was the head coach then. He was a backup quarterback when I was with the Chiefs. So we went in the game quite a bit together, a lot. We were kind of packaged to, he was the 3rd quarterback as the season went on, and me going on the practice squad. We spent a lot of time down on the other end with the defense. And he was a great guy, really talented guy, just big arm guy, and actually a big quarterback guy that was athletic beyond, what you would believe in terms of his stature and position. So he was a guy that I paid attention to, all through my career and his career. And when I heard that he was coaching, it wasn't ever a true idea. Man, I need to get into coaching. This is my passion. This is my calling. It was just an idea of this is someone that I can use that can point me in the right direction. So I reached out to Coach Snyder at one time and told him the same thing. Like, I don't know what I want to do. But I do want to do something where I'm working with young people. Obviously, the background is athletics, mm-hmm. But just point me in the right direction, And so Coach Snyder reached out to some high schools. Jonathan Quinn had done the same thing, and then they obviously neither had anywhere for me to go. And then Jonathan called me probably a month later and said that he had a position opening up. In the NAIA level, you get in, you can coach anything. It's I played running back. I ended up coaching wide receivers the first year. Had never done that before, and so he said, I have to do this the right way. I'm going to interview you, and I'm going to see what you know about the position. We went through it, and it was a good thing, and it was a good fit. But getting there, I had that same feeling that we're just not doing enough to put these kids in the best position that they need to be in. Obviously, with the NFL not looming for a lot of NAIA kids, you have to kind of love the game first and foremost. Financially, it's a great commitment because you're not getting full scholarships. And then just the preparation of when you're done here, you immediately go into the real world.
Right.
And I didn't think even, we were winning games, and I didn't think we were doing enough in terms of preparing these kids. Obviously, with it being a Christian school, a Nazarene school, everything was based on this faith of service.
Yeah.
And it came down to that for me. I was just like, man, I never was able to put a tag on what I wanted to do. And I was like, man, I really feel more natural serving people than anything else. It was nothing. I always thought that football was what I was put here for. But it was never, or athletics was what I was put here for. But I could never reach the same amount of people that I was able to with just trying to be there for them and building those relationships. So the first year I did that, and then I immediately wanted to go into graduate school for school counseling. Initially started out wanting to do mental health, and then once I got into the program, with the background being athletics, they kind of nudged me in that direction, which I ended up agreeing with. And that was kind of the beginning of the academic commitment. Was how are you going to tell these young people, once again, to do these things that you're not willing to do? For so long, my story had been, I had a 2.0 grade point average. I had a point such and such grade point average at this time, and you could do so much better. Like you can't, and it just became part of my story that as a 30 whatever age man at the time, I didn't want to hear the negatives about my story anymore. I did, especially academically. Now that I have my own children who are in school, it was hard for me to say, I expect you to get straight A's because you're capable. Although they were never going to see my report cards, I should get straight A's because I'm capable. I mean, that's what I'm preaching. And it really just became that. No one was watching. The wife she didn't even have access to it. So, I mean, I didn't have to tell anybody what I was bringing home in terms of grades. But it just became one of those things. It became something that I wanted to stand for in terms of just the excellence part of it, the achievement.
You can be told the right way to do something day in and day out. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter until you tell yourself.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you did. You got your master's from Mid-American Nazarene, and you did master's work at K-State in counseling. Yeah. You don't technically have your master's in counseling?
I do. I actually just took my comprehensive test and passed it. So
you got 2 masters.
I do. 2 masters.
Christmas. Show off. And you're working on your doctorate.
Yes.
How far along you're into thesis, aren't you?
I am. I'm a year. I just did my first residency, which is a year into it. And then I have a couple more courses, actual classroom courses. And then I will go into my preparation for my dissertation. So,
wow.
Yeah.
You're going to be Dr. Hall?
I am.
Are you going to make all your buddies call you doctor?
I am.
Good. I would do it with like a French accent. You got to call me doctor. Something just to really mess with them. But that's amazing. It literally is. Because I thought about getting a master's. I'm like, I don't have that commitment. Mm-hmm. I'm done with this. And you did the opposite. You fought yourself a long time, and then you embraced yourself, and what you've done is amazing. But let's be honest, getting a bunch of degrees doesn't mean you're going to get a bunch of money either. Right. So you go into counseling, Topeka High, Junction City, anywhere else I'm missing?
No.
And start working with kids. What was that experience like?
I mean, it was great. I actually did, before the high schools, I did my internships and my practicum studies while I was still in the program. At elementary schools, you had to do primary and secondary. So I started off in the elementary schools, and I didn't think, I was like, man, this big black guy is walking into this school. No one's going to talk to me.
Step on anyone.
Like I'm going to have to reach out to these kids and kind of pull things from them. And it was the total opposite. Like I walked on the campus the first day, I came in a suit, and I walked on the campus and these kids just swarmed me. I was like, man, this is amazing. Crazy, and it was totally uncomfortable, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to step. I don't, want to offend anybody. And then we get in, and that was the routine every day. Like, it just became like, that's what they counted on. So, I mean, it kind of confirmed that that's what people were looking for, was those connections. And these kids come from, I was in Topeka, which is Whitson Elementary. They come from the top of the line to the bottom in terms of economic, socioeconomic status. And it didn't matter. I walked in, and, one of the girls' dad was a surgeon, and she was like, man, you look a lot like my dad. And it was this young blonde white girl, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure I don't look like your dad, but that's, and he was just a big guy, and I met him later on. He wasn't as big as I was, but he was a bigger guy, and that's what she attributed, and then you had your young black student, who was, dad may have been absent or dad may have been incarcerated, whatever the case was, and they related to you from that perspective. And then you had the Hispanic student, and it was just the most fulfilling thing that, to be that person for them, that it didn't really matter. It was a million different things that these levels of education that I have the path that I've gone on, I could have tweaked and ran into a bunch of money. But I did the NFL thing and never felt really complete about that either, but when I went, and I drove an hour to Topeka every day to go out there and finally feel like a superstar. Like I really felt like a superstar, not from, notice of anything that you could do for them, but just who you were, just being there. And that was huge. And I would have signed off on my decision 100, I would do it 100 different times because of that, that connection. Going into the high schools, it was a little more difficult to generate those connections initially, but once you did, it was, and you hear stories about these young people and things that they're going through that would make you, quiver in a corner, even the things that I witnessed growing up where I was. And I couldn't imagine, a ninth grade kid or eighth grade kid going through certain things. I couldn't imagine those young kids at Whitson Elementary going through the things that they had experienced. And then having those experiences, having those connections, having those stories told to you almost removes any chance for you to feel sorry for yourself. And that's where it got to. It's like, man, I'm tired. I have 4 kids. Oh my goodness. We have a tournament this weekend. I don't want to do this. Oh, the boy wants to go out and throw the football. Like, and man, this young girl is getting such and such done to her at home. Tighten, get it together, man. Let's go. And it became bigger than me. It wasn't about the time that I was putting in. It was about why I was doing it and why I showed up every day. And that's basically where I am now, is just wanting to be something for somebody else.
You end up at Junction City, so now the commute's mostly gone. It's still a commute. Similar job, and you're in a good groove. You really are. And then the phone rang.
Yeah.
Before that, you'd started up a K-State Facebook page, the Pulse of K-State or whatever it is, which I enjoy. I'm on. I think guys like me ruined it. It was mostly ex-football players originally, and then you let dorks like me on it, and it's not quite the same. But your phone, and it made you. It was an interesting choice because we knew Joe Hall was around. We knew Joe Hall was counseling, but none of us had interacted with you. And I remember interacting with you over social media and going, this dude's legit. He's got his crap together. And people must have noticed. Your phone rings. Once Chris Kleiman came in, and it was Sean Snyder, correct? And they describe a job to you that is change your aim all over again. Do you almost feel like you weren't on your right path for a long time, and once you put your feet on that path, it's like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And now if I keep going forward, I'm going to end up where I need to be.
Yeah.
And here you are. It must be incredibly fulfilling to know that you had impact on young people's lives. It's gotten you to a better point. You know, not that working in high schools isn't significant, but you're back in college football. You're working with guys who also have problems, problems you faced at the same place. That's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and the idea was, my wife would always say, like, I see you at a high school. I mean, I see you at a college. I see you with older, student athletes. And because someone else was making that determination, the knucklehead that still resides in me was a little hesitant to truly embrace that that's what I wanted to openly admit to, that college is where I wanted to be. Kansas State University, of course, was where one of the places that I wanted to do what I was doing. But when the phone call came, and it was weird because the day before, me and my wife were talking about potentially the chance of having to move outside of Kansas to kind of see some of these opportunities that have been mentioned by other people. Her having a good job and being in a great situation was something that we were reluctant to even consider, but needed to start having a conversation. And we literally did the night before, and her response was that we're not going anywhere. So I was perfectly comfortable at Junction City. I was trying to figure out, going into my second year, what I could do that would help the situation, not only for myself, but for everybody that was involved, and where we could eventually take the program. And then, Sean calls me when I'm in meeting with a student, and the phone rings, and I look down and it says Sean Snyder, and I'm like, I don't want to answer the phone, but it's it's Sean Snyder. What could this be about, kind of thing. So I ignored it, continued talking to the student, and then the text message comes through, and now I'm like, this could be one of a million different things. But so I continued talking to the student, but I'm preoccupied with this text, man. I didn't touch the phone. I'm just sitting there, and then I'll say, hey, will you go on and go to lunch, and then you come back after lunch and we'll talk some more, and if everything is okay, then just go back to class. If not, feel free to come back in. So they walk out, and I grab the phone, and it says, we have this thing that we've been interviewing for. Would you be interested in? And it could have been, it's not too many things it could have been that I wouldn't have been interested in, just listening to what they thought of me or what they thought of where the direction of the program was going. So I said yes. He hadn't really explained what it was at the time. He went right into, setting up the interview process and the different meeting people, points of contact and things of that nature. So when he finally gave me the itinerary for the interviews, I asked, so what is this position about? And he said, I'll send you the job description. So he emailed me the job description, and it was literally the program that I had spoken to Gene Boyd at Arizona State about doing, if it was, and the question that Gene asked me was, if you could do anything that you wanted to do, like if you could draw up a position, a job for you, a career to do, like what would you do? And it was dealing with student athletes to get them better prepared for transition into college, transition, throughout college, and then transitioning into their life after, athletics. And when I read the description, I honestly thought it was a joke. Like, are you kidding? Like, this is out of my computer, it's literally, I'm like, what is going on? Then I'm like, I actually asked my wife, like, is this serious? Like, are they serious with this thing? Like, she was like, I don't know what's going on. And so interviewing for the position, I felt like I needed to tell everybody that you know, and I felt just like a little kid. You know, it's like a dream come true type thing, just to even be considered for it. Almost too good to be true kind of thing. I was like, man, I hope they're not just interviewing me just to be interviewing, you know, because I was pretty comfortable in what I was doing. I'm going to be pissed off if I don't get the opportunity to do this, because
it's a state job. You got to interview a minority.
Absolutely.
And you're probably sitting there thinking, I'm the guy that they're going to talk to.
Absolutely. And I really hadn't, the way that I translated it off of the paper, I took it where I wanted it to go, which was more suited to what I was bringing to the table. Oh man, I'm a counselor. I do this. I do, you know, it didn't necessarily say those things specifically. So I needed to speak to someone that had an idea of what the position was going to be. So, you know, in those conversations, the first time that I spoke to Coach Kleiman was the first time that I had ever spoken to him, you know, in my interview. And the first thing that I said was, you know, like, I really don't even want to leave here, because like, I think this is the perfect thing for me. Like, I don't want to leave and let you guys make a decision one way or the other.
Move into my office?
Yeah, like, you know, just let me sit over here until you guys decide it, you know, and I didn't want to come off like I'm, for whatever reason, guaranteed that, you know, I'm going to get this job or anything, but like, I couldn't imagine anybody being more prepared or qualified for that position. So that's what I dealt with. It was the idea of, my phone's ringing. Please stop. All right. It was just the idea of having the opportunity that I knew that I was so prepared for and I'm so passionate about, in terms of helping young people. Obviously helping young people that came from and were doing the exact same things that I had done years ago, and was so passionate about. So that's ultimately what it was. He agreed that it was important that we would have to reach out. We would have to have a position that was able to reach out to these kids and kind of, or these young men, and be able to relate from a different point of view. The beautiful part of all of the dumb mistakes that I had made was that I became pretty experienced and knowledgeable.
You got the scars
of how to navigate those things. Yeah. But at the same time, I didn't want credit or to make those things seem like they were the path that these young people needed to do or go, in hopes that they could dig themselves out of the hole, because I've seen hundreds of guys go similar paths and not get the same opportunities that I have gotten, or, you know, that I've positioned myself to be able to receive. So I don't want to ever come across like, hey, have a great time when you're in college and do these things and go out in Aggieville and do, you know, and
learn from them. Look what happened.
No. I'm telling you so you don't have to do those things, and how much better it could be if you did avoid those things. And even with the success that I've had, where I could have been differently, and, you know, the scars that I shouldn't have, that I've, you know, kind of just self-inflicted type things. So I mean, it was still almost unbelievable that it happened the way that it did, but, you know, I'm forever grateful.
So what was your first official day on the job?
I don't know.
Is it May?
I can't remember.
Yeah, we're in late July as we record this. So you really haven't been on the job a long time. No. But as you go to your office in the big, new, incredible Veneer family football complex, which, you know, there's been a building in between the one you had and this one that they redid in the 2000s. Surreal?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I can't even put in words what that trek was like. You know, I walked up the stairs, went on the elevator, and it was like, this is where I should be. Never thought it would happen. I hadn't even seen certain levels of the complex yet, the facility. So I mean, it was great. I sat in my office and I immediately wanted to get to the root of the things that I needed to do. Like, it was I think I posted like 9 pictures of myself in different K-State gear, and it was just like, this is where everything should be. This is it. Then it immediately switches over to not wanting to disappoint anyone, including myself, most importantly. But just wanting to hit the ground running and taking over that position and making it my own, for the benefit of the team and for the program. But still, I sit in there sometimes and I'm like, I talk to my buddies on the phone and they're like, hey, do you have, can I send you this information on this kid or this player? And I'm like, what? Oh, yeah, I guess I can, I can pass it on this, and it's just that idea that I've been doing these things without this position for so long. Like I've been, I've had friends that have called to have me have, communication with their nephews or cousins or so-and-so that are, struggling with certain things or dealing with certain things, or just some that just want guidance through, certain processes of, the NCAA things, and now it's you get paid for it. So I mean that makes it a little different, but at the same time, like I look at some of these young men, they walk into my office and I can almost see myself, like it's almost I put a little picture that I got from the media guys, and it's an old picture with curly hair and all of this thing, and I sit it on my desk, and then a guy like Eric Gallen, that walks in, and I'm like, man, it kind of looks like the same crazy hair that I had at the, and it just takes me right back to that, and I want to be that guy that I felt like I needed at that time. So beyond all of the education and things that I've done, and things that you should do in counseling and shouldn't do in counseling, and things that you want to look for in terms of service, and it makes it real easy to even wash all of those things away and just say, like, what did you need at that time? Like what was missing from what made you feel like you should make the decisions that you did, and that you would be okay one way or the other. And a lot of that was just the absence of having mom and dad close enough, feeling like you had adults that were willing to kick you in your butt, but really, really cared, and you knew that they cared. You knew that they cared because they were kicking you in your butt and still dealing with you. So that's just what I try to do.
I don't mean to be melodramatic here, but it's, a kid from Compton found his home in Kansas, place to raise a family. You've accomplished a lot. I mean, raising kids in Manhattan, Kansas is radically different than LA.
Absolutely.
Well, congratulations on all of it. And we've got people up on the Ring of Fame for All-Americans in yardage and all that. And I'd take your accomplishments any day. It's really cool. Okay, let's wrap this up with something we call the overtime. We ask one of our subscribers, I think you probably peeked at our message boards, it gets a little interesting, to give us 5 questions that are a little bit off the beaten path. And we do this in our podcast, so we brought it over here. This is from Purple Powerhouse, which I thought was that could be your screen name. Maybe it is. Maybe I don't know who Purple Power. Maybe you just ask yourself these questions. Question 1, did you have any game day rituals, superstitions you did?
I did. I had to go, I used to try to show off my arm. I wanted Coach Hudson at the time to let me throw pitch passes quite a bit. So I would go out on the field pre-game and throw the ball as far as I could to my other guys and catch the ball with one hand. And there's probably 50 people in the stands at that time. Not a big thing, but you could always feel like they were watching you at that moment. So always wanted to show off my arm. I did that all through high school. And you could almost feel when you threw the ball that, that electricity, that, that was good.
Part of football.
So I just, it was one of the things that for pre-game ritual, that you just continue to do it. And, started off real selfish and just became one of the things that you did just because it was a routine. So.
Did you ever have a weird encounter with a fan that sticks out? You mentioned people in the store touching you.
I had a few.
Anything we can share?
That's the tricky part. Probably off of we get emails all the time, and I think at the time, I don't know how it is now. I'm pretty sure it's the same, but you could look up the email of someone. So the first time that I ever used my K-State email, I went in and it had like 1,700 messages in there, and actual messages, and for whatever reason, that click was on a young lady that was from Nebraska that was, and the internet wasn't what it was then as it is now, so, but anyway, she ended up coming to town to tell me that I had been communicating with her the entire, and it was all clean. There was just, appreciation type things, but she showed up in Aggieville. And it was one of the weirdest things, because I never thought that you would generate a relationship with someone of any sort with, just from linking up on an
Joe
email.
Hall's what she wanted. Steaks, rare, medium, well done, burnt. Don't say that.
I like mine medium, I believe. I think I did medium rare one time, and it was a little too rare. I'm
a rare guy. I'm weird.
Yeah.
This is the biggest question for me, if you follow me on social media at all. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
That's the right answer. It's the right answer, because he said any response other than dog is wrong. Yeah. I'm a dog person. Okay, as a teacher, for someone that worked with youth, he's also a teacher. What was your best or worst teacher experience?
As a student?
No, when you were guiding students. You want to call what you did a teacher?
Yeah. The worst is just, I'll start from that end. So many different, like I said earlier, so many different stories that you hear that you almost want to just take the kids home with you. And that was probably one of the most heartbreaking things for me, was the idea that you can't save everyone. You can't fix the problems all the time. One of the things that I struggled with most in my education portion of my school counseling career was the idea of our leaders in school counseling to tell you that you're not going to be able to reach everyone. Coming from competition, it's a win or loss type thing. So am I winning or am I losing? And the answer was you were going to lose a lot more than you win. And I just couldn't handle that, just the idea of that. But I've heard some stories that, like I said, will break your heart.
Yeah.
And I think the most disappointing thing is just not being able to have the power or the ability to fix those for those people, for those young kids especially, families in general. And then on the other end of that is just the idea, one time we had a young girl that was going through some things, and offered to have her come home with my family and I and stay with us until they could figure some other things out. Obviously being a man, that creates an outside perception that you have to be careful of. Having a 15-year-old son who was the same age as this young lady, creates some issues in itself. And it was just the idea that a bunch of people stood up and stepped up for this young person that were in a better situation that could help her, was confirmation that we were doing what we were supposed to do. And you look at it from a win and loss perspective, that was a definite win. This is a young lady that was self-harming, had been abused, all of these types of things, that ended up graduating this year without any hiccups over the last couple years. And I think just the interactions with her early on were that confirmation that you needed, that this is going to be fine. And it didn't start off as a relationship that you sought out, or it was just in conversation that you found these things out, so stepping away from the win and loss part of it is, you never know the effect or the response or the quality of what you're bringing to the table. Just do it and hope that it works out for the best.
That's a Big 12 title of counseling right there. Yeah. That's pretty good. Well, Joe, I appreciate it, and we didn't talk football hardly at all.
No.
We're going to do this again so we can talk football, because you really know your football, even though you're not coaching. I want to dig into that football mind of yours at a later date. Well, that's it for this edition of the Power Chat. We appreciate you coming along with us, and we appreciate the folks at Blue Mark Energy.